What if the real threat to your money isn't a crisis, but a system? What if fear itself is the product they sell you? This is silent extortion to sake, and almost no one sees it. The modern financial system doesn't need violence. It uses fear of financial loss. Fear keeps people obedient. Fear keeps money flowing upward. It isn't chaos. It's financial manipulation by design. Banks power the system afraid, and they understand psychology of fear. This is how money and power quietly control behavior. System designed to keep you poor and compliant. Once you see the hidden truth about money, fear breaks. Theo explains the banking system anchor without the lies. Financial awakening is the real threat to their control.
Let me ask you a question that most people are afraid to answer. What is the real price you pay to feel safe? Not the price of alarms or insurance. I'm talking about the price of your financial existence. Because right now, whether you realize it or not, you're living under something I call silent extortion. Picture this for just a moment. A rainy street in Chicago, around 1930. A man in a fedora and a trench coat walks into a small family bakery. He doesn't shout. He doesn't pull a gun. He smiles and says, "You have a beautiful business. It would be a shame if something happened to it." That scene is familiar. We've seen it 100 times. We know exactly what it is. Protection money. Extortion. Now here's the uncomfortable truth most people never confront. That business model never died. It didn't disappear with Al Capone. It didn't go underground. It simply changed its address. Today, the most powerful extortionists in the world don't operate in dark alleys. They operate from glass towers. They don't wear fedoras. They wear tailored suits. And instead of baseball bats, they use a far more effective weapon: the fear of your total financial ruin. Think about your own life. That constant low-level anxiety when you watch the news. Interest rates, inflation, banks on the brink. That feeling that something fragile could collapse at any moment. That fear is not accidental. It is engineered. Just like the shopkeeper, you are constantly reminded. It would be a shame if the system collapsed and your savings disappeared. So you pay. Not with cash in an envelope, but through inflation, bailouts, hidden fees, and a system that quietly drains your wealth while calling it economic stability. This is extortion that has been sanitized, legalized, and rebranded as policy. And here's the most disturbing part. Unlike the bakery owner, the modern citizen often thanks the extortionist. We're grateful the system didn't collapse, never asking why it's designed to threaten collapse every few years in the first place. If you've ever felt like the game is rigged, if you feel like you're working harder just to stay in the same place, you're not crazy. You're seeing the mechanism of silent extortion. Stay with me. Because once you understand how this trap was built, how fear became a weapon and risk became a leash, you will never look at your bank account or the system behind it the same way again. It's a heavy realization, isn't it? Discovering that the anxiety sitting in your chest at night isn't random. It's designed. And the moment you see that, something changes. You don't become pessimistic. You become aware. And awareness is exactly what this system fears most. That's why conversations like this matter. Because silence is the fuel that keeps this machine running smoothly. The moment people start connecting the dots, the illusion weakens. So before we go any further, I want to ask you just one thing, and be honest with yourself. Have you ever felt forced to play along with the financial system, not because you trust it, but because you're afraid of what happens if you don't? If the answer is yes, you already understand more than most people ever will. Leave a comment with a simple yes, nothing more. That signal alone tells me you're seeing the pressure for what it really is. Now stay with me, because this is where it gets uncomfortable. To understand how this system keeps extracting value year after year, we need to look past money, past banks, past policies. We need to look at the one product they sell better than anything else. And it's not wealth. It's not security. It's chaos. Carefully engineered, precisely timed, and endlessly profitable. Now we need to go deeper. Because once you truly see the mechanism, you can't unsee it. This isn't about bad actors or isolated mistakes. It's about a business model. Racketeering isn't a criminal accident, it's a strategy. And when you strip away the jargon, the logic is brutally simple. First, you create a vulnerability. Then, you amplify the fear around that vulnerability. Finally, you sell protection. That's it. That's the entire formula. In the criminal world, the metaphor is obvious. A mobster breaks your window, then offers to protect your shop. In the financial world, the crime is cleaner and far more effective. No fires, no bats, just numbers, charts, and language so complex it makes you feel small. The arson still happens. You just don't smell the smoke. Here's the first uncomfortable truth. Stability is bad for business. If markets were calm, boring, and predictable, Wall Street as we know it wouldn't exist. There would be no justification for endless fees, complex products, or armies of experts. So stability can't be allowed to last. Volatility isn't a flaw. It's a requirement. They need waves to sell boats. They need storms to sell shelters. And the fear that pushes you toward them? That fear is engineered. Pause for a second and think about how often you're warned. Recession coming. Crash looming. Correction ahead. Crisis inevitable. This constant sense of danger keeps your nervous system on edge. And a scared mind doesn't think clearly. It looks for authority. It looks for protection. It looks for someone to take control. That's the trap. Because once fear takes over, you don't ask who built the maze, you just beg for a guide. You hand over your money not because you trust the system, but because the alternative feels suicidal. You accept the fees, the low returns, the absurd complexity, because you've been convinced that without them, you're helpless. And this is where the power dynamic flips. You are no longer a participant, you are a passenger. Imagine sitting on a bus where the driver keeps swerving toward the edge of a cliff, then correcting at the last second. Every time your heart jumps, every time you thank the driver for his skill, you never stop to ask the obvious question. Why is he swerving at all? Because uncertainty is profitable. When markets panic, volume explodes, trades multiply, fees pile up, assets change hands rapidly, usually from weak hands to strong ones. For institutions, chaos is a ladder. For regular people, chaos is a pit. Same event, opposite outcomes. Now watch how this pressure bleeds into your daily life. You hesitate, you freeze, you keep money parked in accounts that quietly lose value to inflation. Not because it's smart, but because it feels safe. You're making decisions under duress. And duress always benefits the system applying the pressure. Complexity is the second layer of the trap. Derivatives, swaps, futures, instruments so opaque that even regulators struggle to explain them. That confusion isn't accidental. It creates dependency. It reinforces the lie that finance is a game for geniuses and that you don't belong at the table. So you outsource your sovereignty. And the moment you do that, the toll booth appears. Every transaction is taxed. Every movement skimmed. If the market rises, they charge performance fees. If it collapses, they charge management fees. Heads they win, tails you lose. The house doesn't gamble, it owns the casino. Here comes the next break in the illusion. Every crisis is presented as unpredictable. A tragedy, a black swan. But history tells a different story. Deregulation, leverage, speculation. Repeat. The fire is prepared long before the spark. And when the collapse finally comes, the panic is so intense that the public begs for rescue. And who gets rescued? Not you, the architects. This is where chaos reveals its final function, control. Because once people are terrified of total collapse, they'll accept almost anything in the name of saving the system. Bailouts, money printing, emergency powers. Institutions become too big to fail, not because they serve society, but because society has been chained to their survival. Then comes the psychological double bind, fear of loss and fear of missing out. Media-fueled frenzies pull people into bubbles at the worst possible moment. Hope replaces caution, savings flood in. Then the smart money exits, the bubble bursts, and the public holds the bag. Boom, bust, transfer. That cycle isn't a bug, it's the heartbeat of the machine. The moment you recognize this, something shifts. Headlines stop sounding like news. They start sounding like marketing. Volatility stops feeling random. It feels deliberate. You realize the system needs you scared enough to pay, but not informed enough to resist. And here's where this understanding gets dangerous for them. Because once a population sees chaos as a weapon, the leverage disappears. And when that happens, the system has only one move left. And that's what we're about to look at next. Because there comes a moment, a very specific moment in history, when the threat stops being implied and becomes explicit. When the gun is placed on the table and an entire nation is told there is no alternative. That moment is the ultimate proof of this extortion. If the engineering of chaos still feels like theory, 2008 is where it becomes flesh and bone. This is the moment abstraction dies. This is where the system shows its teeth. And to understand silent extortion in its purest form, you don't need equations, acronyms, or financial jargon. You need to remember how it felt. Because in 2008, something unprecedented happened. The whisper became a scream. For weeks, the air itself felt heavy. News anchors spoke with panic in their voices. Politicians appeared pale, sleepless. And behind closed doors, a message was being delivered. Not politely, not subtly, but with absolute clarity. If you don't pay us, everything collapses. That was the threat. Not framed as responsibility, not framed as accountability, but as inevitability. They didn't say, we made reckless bets. They didn't say, we broke the system. They said, if we fall, you fall with us. Pause on that for a moment. This wasn't an economic argument. It was psychological warfare. The narrative pushed to Congress and to the public was apocalyptic. Credit would freeze, trucks would stop moving, stores would empty, paychecks would vanish, and the ultimate fear trigger, ATMs would go dark, no cash, no access, no escape. And just like that, the crisis became a hostage situation. Imagine a man entering a crowded room, strapping explosives to his chest, and calmly saying, if you don't meet my demands, we all die. In any other context, we call that terrorism. We call it criminal. We neutralize the threat. But in 2008, when the largest banks on earth did it, we called it saving the system. Here is the sentence you need to remember, the one that defines everything. They didn't ask for help. They demanded ransom, and the ransom was paid. With your money, with your future, with your children's economy. This was silent extortion at its peak. No longer subtle, no longer hidden. The architects of the disaster were rescued first. The same institutions that lobbied for deregulation, that flooded the system with toxic assets, that paid themselves obscene bonuses, were made whole. They kept the profits. They kept the power. They kept the penthouses. Millions of families, meanwhile, lost their homes. This wasn't a side effect. It was the transfer. Behind the scenes, this was a masterclass in leverage. The banks knew the political class was terrified of a depression. They knew the public didn't understand repo markets or interbank lending. Fear plus ignorance equals control. When the Treasury Secretary dropped to one knee, begging lawmakers to approve the funds, it wasn't humility. It was theater. The final act of a script where the public was forced to cannibalize its own future to keep the predators alive. And something broke that year. Even if people couldn't explain it, they felt it. We realized the game was rigged. In this casino, when you lose, you're wiped out. When they lose, the dealer refills their chips. That's moral hazard. And it's poison. Because once you know you'll be rescued, caution disappears. Risk becomes addictive. Bigger bets, bigger leverage, bigger explosions. Heads they win, tails you pay. The investigations that followed only confirmed the rot. Rating agencies paid to lie. Regulators asleep or auditioning for banking jobs. Collusion dressed up as complexity. But the real damage wasn't financial. It was trust. We learned that the institutions sold as guardians of stability were, in reality, holding the detonator. Not because they were essential, but because they wired themselves into the blast radius. This is why too big to fail is such a dangerous phrase. It sounds like stability, but it really means immunity. It means no consequences. It means protection money works. And here's the most disturbing part. 2008 didn't fix the system. It validated it. The banks are bigger now, more concentrated, more intertwined. The gun never left our head. We just got used to the cold metal. This wasn't a one-time failure. It's the operating system, the proof that fear can be monetized, and collapse can be weaponized. And once a population accepts hostage status, control becomes effortless. That's why every modern headline about liquidity stress or banking instability feels familiar. Same script, new actors, same threat. So here's the question that matters now. Do you accept being the hostage, or do you start looking for the exit? If this reframing of 2008 clicks for you, leave a comment and write, "I see the hostage situation." Not for me, but as a signal to yourself that you're no longer buying the official story. Because now that we've seen the gun, the next step is even more important. We need to expose the camouflage, the language they use when the threat isn't explicit. The words designed to keep you calm, compliant, and quiet. And that's exactly where we're going next. Understanding that we were held hostage in 2008 explains the trauma, but it doesn't explain how the system keeps repeating itself without people revolting. For that, we need to look at the real enforcement mechanism, not fear, not violence, confusion. In the old mafia, silence was enforced by omerta. You didn't ask questions, and you didn't talk. Break the rule, and there were consequences. On Wall Street, they perfected a more advanced version. No threats, no guns, just complexity. An ocean of noise so dense that you stop swimming and let yourself sink. Think back to 2008. After the dust settled, did anyone ever explain, in plain language, what actually happened? Or were we buried under acronyms, charts, and terms so mind-numbing that most people eventually gave up trying to understand? That wasn't an accident. That was damage control. Here's the trick. Complexity creates silence without force. Let me ask you something, and be honest. Have you ever read a financial headline and thought, "I don't really get this, but I guess the experts do"? That moment right there is the trap snapping shut. Words like quantitative easing, derivatives, repo markets, collateralized debt obligations aren't just technical terms. They're linguistic barbed wire. They don't exist to inform you. They exist to keep you out, to make you feel unqualified, to make you step back and say, "This isn't for people like me." And once you feel that, authority takes over. You stop questioning. You stop demanding explanations. You accept whatever outcome follows. Here's a concrete example. If someone steals your car, you know exactly what happened. There's a thief, a victim, and a crime. But when a bank engineers a financial product so complex that it implodes the economy, wipes out your retirement, and triggers a global bailout, what do you even call that? Who do you point to? What law was broken? You were hit, but you can't even name the weapon. That's not a flaw of the system. That's the design. After 2008, this complexity became a shield. Failure was rebranded as unforeseen risk. Negligence became market conditions. Theft was sanitized into liquidity events. The language wasn't meant to explain the crime. It was meant to erase it. And here's the part most people miss. This complexity doesn't just confuse the public. It protects the guilty. In courtrooms, in hearings, in investigations, the flood of data, models, and technicalities blurs intent. Everything becomes a misunderstanding, an algorithm, a rounding error. Accountability drowns in spreadsheets. Now pause, because this matters. In every other area of life, real intelligence simplifies. The best teachers make hard things clear. The best engineers explain systems so anyone can understand them. So ask yourself, if these institutions can't explain what they do in plain English, what are they hiding? Here's the uncomfortable truth. The mechanics of theft are always simple. Whether it's a pickpocket on the subway or a central bank diluting your currency, the result is the same. You have less, and they have more. Everything else is camouflage. This is why confusion is so valuable to them. A confused population doesn't rebel. It disengages, it gets bored, it tunes out, and silence returns. Not because people agree, but because they feel intellectually disarmed. That's Wall Street's omerta. But once you see this, you can't unsee it. Complexity stops looking impressive and starts looking suspicious. And that realization cracks the foundation of their power. Because the next question becomes unavoidable. If this is so destructive, why is it legal? And that's where this story gets even darker. Because in the next layer, the banker and the lawmaker stop being separate characters and start being the same person. Complexity is the shield. But now comes the part most people never want to accept. The law itself is the weapon. We are taught to believe the law exists to protect us, a moral line separating right from wrong. But in high finance, the law isn't a wall. It's clay, molded, reshaped, and aimed directly at you. Here's the difference that changes everything. The old gangster had to break the law to steal. The modern financial elite simply rewrite the law so stealing becomes legal. Think about Al Capone. He hid from the police. He bribed judges in back rooms. He lived like a fugitive. Now compare that to the CEO of a too-big-to-fail bank. He doesn't run from lawmakers. He has them on speed dial. He doesn't fear regulation. He helps write it. That's not corruption on the margins. That's corruption built into the architecture. And this is where the revolving door comes in. The quiet engine that keeps the system locked in place. The people paid to regulate the banks leave government and immediately take multi-million-dollar jobs inside the banks. Bank executives, in turn, slide effortlessly into positions at the Treasury, the Federal Reserve, and regulatory agencies. Same people, same interests, different titles. Imagine a referee calling a game while negotiating a contract with one of the teams on the field. Every call suddenly makes sense. That's not incompetence. That's incentive. And the consequences hit your life directly. When you make a mistake on your taxes, the system is ruthless. When a bank launders billions or rigs markets, it's a settlement. No guilt, no jail. Just a fine smaller than the profit. This double standard isn't a flaw. It's the business model. Laws are written in thousands of pages of dense text for a reason. Not so you can understand them, but so you can't. Those pages aren't written by elected officials. They're written by lobbyists, line by line, loophole by loophole. Somewhere deep in that document, a crime quietly becomes a market function. And once it's legal, outrage dies. That's the trap. Because legality creates obedience. People stop resisting when they're told, this is just how the system works. Fear takes over. Silence returns. And this is where everything converges. Complexity, law, fear. You feel it in your daily life. Rising costs, shrinking security, bailouts upward, austerity downward. You work more, risk more, save less, while the same institutions grow larger, safer, and untouchable. This isn't political incompetence. It's efficiency. They privatize the gains. They socialize the losses. And the law certifies it as legitimate. Now here's the emotional shift you need to make. Once you realize the law isn't neutral, once you see it isn't designed to protect you, the question stops being, why is this happening? The real question becomes, why do we keep consenting to it? Because here's what they never tell you. Their power does not come from money alone. It comes from fear, from resignation, from the belief that there is no alternative. And that belief, that's the final cage. In the next part, we're going to break that illusion. Because once fear is exposed, it loses its grip. And when fear collapses, the entire system starts to tremble. Now we need to go deeper, not to end this story, but to shift it. Everything we've uncovered so far, the engineered chaos, the silent extortion, the legal traps, the manipulation, converges on a single target. Not your bank account, your mind. Let's return to the image from the beginning. The shopkeeper and the mobster. The mobster doesn't need to break the shopkeeper's legs every week. He only needs the shopkeeper to believe that his legs will be broken. The power of extortion lives entirely inside the victim's fear. In the modern world, that fear has a name: the fear of financial loss. This is the invisible chain binding millions of people to a system that exploits them. It explains why, even while inflation rises, corruption is exposed, and the game is visibly rigged, most people do nothing. Not because they're stupid, but because they're terrified of what might happen if they step outside the system. They've been taught that outside the lines there is only chaos. That questioning central banks is dangerous. That taking responsibility for your own financial future is reckless. So people stay on the treadmill, working harder for money that buys less, feeling grateful for scraps, mistaking survival for security. But here's where the transformation begins. Seeing this system clearly is not pessimism. It feels heavy at first, yes, like staring at something too big to confront. But recognizing the cage is the first step toward leaving it. Denial keeps you trapped. Awareness gives you options. It's the difference between a child frozen by the dark and an adult who knows where the light switch is. The system depends on your consent. It needs you to wake up every day and accept rules designed to drain you slowly. Silent extortion only works if you believe their protection is necessary. So ask the question they don't want you asking. What are they actually protecting you from? They say they protect you from volatility while creating the bubbles. They say they protect your savings while diluting the currency. They say they protect the economy while rescuing the arsonists and letting the house burn. Once you see that the protector is also the predator, something changes. You stop waiting for salvation inside the system and start looking for clarity outside of it. This is where intellectual resistance begins. Not riots, not chaos, not rebellion in the streets. A rebellion of understanding. It starts when you refuse to be gaslit by headlines telling you everything is fine while your cost of living explodes. When you learn how money actually works, not the sanitized version taught in school, but the raw mechanics of power, debt, and control. And here's the paradox. Once you truly understand the system, the fear begins to dissolve. You realize the loss you were afraid of isn't hypothetical. It's already happening, quietly, every single day. The real risk was never action. The real risk was standing still. Without fear, your behavior changes. You stop reacting to panic-driven news cycles. You stop chasing hype at market peaks. You stop confusing noise with truth. You become an observer, not a pawn. That clarity is dangerous, not to you, but to the system. A fearful population is easy to manage. An educated, calm, self-directed population is not. This path isn't loud, and it isn't easy. It requires you to stand apart when the crowd is celebrating illusions, to question narratives when others outsource thinking to experts. It can feel isolating, but it's the only road that leads somewhere real. Silent extortion doesn't end with a revolution. It ends quietly, the moment you decide you're done paying for ignorance. What we've covered so far is not the conclusion. It's the awakening. The door has cracked open, but we haven't stepped through it yet, because understanding the problem is only half the journey. In the final part, we're going to talk about what comes next, how power reacts when fear no longer works, and why the end of extortion never looks the way people expect. This isn't the ending. It's the moment before everything changes. If you're still here, this isn't entertainment for you, and it's recognition. You saw something click into place, and once you see it, there's no going back. This channel exists for people who refuse to live on the surface, people who want to understand how power really works and what it does to their money, their time, and their future. So here's the moment of choice. Subscribe now, not later, not someday, now. Because the next video goes one layer deeper into the exact mechanism they use to control the currency itself. This is where most explanations stop and where the truth actually begins. Click the video on your screen and continue the investigation. The door is open.